Welcome to the Insurance Journal Academy of Insurance's Thursday webinar after show. And today's webinar was Booze the Webinar. You've heard of Winnie the Pooh, Santa Claus the movie. Well, the Academy today brought you Booze the Webinar. And I say booze because booze was in capital letters in the title. We're joined today by our director, the director of the Academy of Insurance, Mr. Patrick Raitt, and today's instructor for our webinar, Mr. Kevin Amrhein. So welcome, Kevin, to the after show. And first, I'd like to mention that the last after show you were on, you were more dramatically hirsute facially, meaning your beard was much bigger. And my first question is, because I'm going to ask it because our viewers want me to ask this of you, why did you trim the beard?
Your viewers want to, that's what they want to know. I love these people.
Need to know.
I love your audience. Where do I get your audience?
That's the tip of the iceberg for the questions. So.
This is a very, very complicated situation. It's very sensitive. It's not sensitive or complicated at all. What happened was my wife took a look at it one day and said, why are we still doing this? And I tried to blame my daughter. I have a 5-year-old. I tried to say, well, Everly says she likes it. And my wife looks at Everly and says, do you like Daddy's giant beard? And Everly said, no. And so it's gone now.
Wow.
She ratted you out.
Turns out she was lying the whole time. The entire thing was a lie. They thought it was just a ridiculous thing from start to finish. And so we got rid. That's the extent of it. And it needed to go. It was, where was I going with this thing? What was the point, So I just said, let's get out of here. So we took it off. We got some great before and after pictures.
You were bordering on full on Duck Dynasty beard.
Yeah. Yeah. That was, I guess, my end game was, to try to be able to stand shoulder to shoulder with folks of their caliber. And, but I was lazy and but yeah, it's gone. So there you go. That's the very complicated answer. My wife and daughter said it was time to go. So, I'm outnumbered in my household.
Well, so today's webinar, you talked about liability as relates to different facets of coverage for different entities like personal, property. There were a couple others, and you covered them as much as you could with the amount of time we had. What's the most, I was expecting to hear more about personal liability, like you had more towards the end of the webinar, but what do you think do you think one kind of coverage in terms of booze and food service is more important than the other? Like, is property more important than, what kind of liability do you think is more, or are they all equal in your eyes?
They're not all equal in my eyes. I think liability coverage is infinitely more important. The property stuff is interesting and is probably easier to talk to insureds about, because the idea of walking in one day, if it's a static risk, if it's a restaurant or a bar or something, the idea of walking in one day and the cooler doesn't work, and oh my gosh, what am I going to do? I can't go and pay retail at Costco or whatever and replenish my entire supply. It'll bankrupt me. I'm running lean as it is. That is terrifying to the business owner, but not to me nearly as terrifying as the potential for a liability claim of any kind, whether it's booze related or not. Somebody just slips and falls in on the premises is pretty scary. I think the likelihood of that is increased for obvious reasons when you're talking about the booze exposure. But liquor liability, I kind of gave, it was kind of a checklist for agents that want to get into the food and beverage space. And I did give a sort of a block of coverages there that I thought should not be overlooked. So there's plenty of important things on the employment practices side. You're a lot food and beverage industry. You're dealing with a lot of, in some cases, young workers that may be more subject to wage and hour issues, to harassment issues. So you've got a lot of interesting things to talk about there. But I believe the liquor liability coverage is the most interesting part of it, because of the way I think it is so connected to the laws in various states that either protect or don't protect businesses. And also, I didn't spend a lot of time on it, but to me, the personal and advertising exposure, because of the way that so many of these small businesses don't have these huge ad budgets, marketing budgets. And so they use social media campaigns, promotions. They grab ideas from all over the internet, pictures and things from all over the internet, could easily be ripping off another business, causing, stealing, putting up videos or something of somebody else's intellectual property. And then the idea of how do you, as a place that relies on the sale of alcohol, what's your clientele? What's your brand? You want fun, right? You want people to be able to say, okay, I'm going to have a good time consuming this product with other people consuming this product. So promotions often have pictures from events, people partying, and what's the consequence of maybe posting a picture on social media that has somebody's likeness in it, and that person is now being seen by hundreds and hundreds of people out at this bar, out at this club, drunk out of their mind. What are the potential consequences to that person? So the personal and advertising side of it, I think, is also extremely valuable. I would say of the non-liquor liability coverages, that would be the one that I'm the most interested in.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting. Towards the end of the class, you talk about marketing related liability, and I thought that was I hadn't thought of it in that context, but there's
a case, there's a court case. It was shared with me by a colleague of mine. What happened was a young lady was enjoying ladies' night. She posed in a picture with a couple of other young ladies. The likeness of these young ladies was very much on display. She was very obviously intoxicated, almost practically being held up in the picture by these other young ladies. At no point did she consent to allow her likeness to be shown. Well, this nightclub used that picture as part of their promotions for, hey, look at how much, basically a ladies' night or a event used that picture. And that picture was seen by many, 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 many people on social media. And it got back to her employer, who essentially terminated her because of the nature of her employment. It wasn't a good look to have somebody out in public inebriated. Didn't take long for the claim for damages to be filed against the nightclub. She retained counsel. I mean, I'm not talking about wrongful termination. I'm talking about going after the nightclub for starting this whole mess. And so that's one example. So just claims like that you see happen sometimes, really, to me, interesting. I think most of your folks in the booze business should be more concerned with liquor liability. I'll tell you, smaller businesses, your little pop-up businesses, food trucks, smaller kind of takeout. A lot of folks, real popular curbside, these little places popping up where you can go and get your burgers and your hot dogs or whatever. You just walk up and they got the cooler of beer there where you can buy some beers. Maybe they got a license, maybe they don't. But the idea for even a business that doesn't take themselves all that seriously like that, still needing liquor liability. And then if you really, really get into this business, insuring risks that serve or manufacture alcohol, like breweries, for example. If you really get into this stuff, you will get into a lot of specialty programs, specialty carriers, and the underwriting process. When you're talking about booze being involved, some of the questionnaires, some of the underwriting data that's collected about what are your hours? Do you do special drink promotions and happy hours? What kind of entertainment do you have?
Wow.
It's really, really interesting stuff. To what level of training do you give to your employees before they're allowed to serve alcohol? So the liquor liability aspect to me is the most interesting.
So in terms of intellectual property, at one point in the talk, you mentioned Crazy Joe's bathtub beer, and you said, I'm not sure if there's a business out there called Crazy Joe's.
Yeah.
I thought it was interesting that in light of what you just said, that you're not sure if there's a business, and I was wondering if in future versions of this course, you might think of changing that business to Insane Jaime's bathtub mint julep emporium to really distance yourself from any kind of liability.
You know, I thought you were going to say that when I mentioned that you Googled it, and that it turns out that there is not only a Crazy Joe's bathtub beer, but that they're actually headquartered in Miami, Florida, and that they used the same picture I used, and that you guys were now very worried because they had already contacted your legal counsel and said that this idiot is making us look fool. I try to use that as and then the Wet Willie's Shrimp Diner in the other supply chain picture.
Right.
Just trying to, give people a picture, an image of this is the type of insured you're probably going to deal with. You're probably not going to walk into Anheuser-Busch anytime soon. You're probably not going to walk into a, very large, very well-established business that isn't going to be contacting, an independent agent anytime soon, looking for insurance. But you will absolutely be contacted by regional companies, local brewers. That business is still growing, even amidst the pandemic, still doing very well. So just kind of a cheesy little thing to say, this is the type of small business you're probably dealing with here.
Gotcha.
I mean, realistically, as a Main Street insurance agent, I don't want to, belittle anybody and say they can't, that they're only going to deal with the little guys, but that's what most of us deal with. Crazy Joe's bath. And I mean, he literally is brewing that in his bathtub.
Prohibition
Maybe,
style, sure, right.
yeah, maybe it has graduated to a bottling plant or something, but at some point, those recipes were in a bathtub.
Gotcha.
That's the American dream. Brew your own bathtub beer.
There you go.
Patrick, what are your thoughts about today's webinar? Entertaining, multifaceted, bathtub laden. The word litany was used at one point. I mean, what do you think? What's happening?
I thought we had a fast and furious kind of hour where, Kevin started and just put his foot in the floor and went through a lot of things. And what was most interesting to me was not just the focus on here's the liquor liability portion, but if somebody's got a business that serves alcohol in some ways, here are a lot of things they need to think about. One thing that Kevin mentioned was outdoor signage and the very little bit of coverage that's available on the ISO standard commercial property policy for an outdoor sign, and just how expensive signage can be. And how even a quick shout out to the inland marine, but interestingly, you're right. There are all kinds of craft breweries, and if it's a restaurant of any kind, there's almost always an alcohol exposure of some sort. Do you find that it's more complicated if there's a restaurant area and a separate bar area, or do you think that doesn't make much of a difference?
You mean from an underwriting standpoint, or just from a risk standpoint?
From a general risk standpoint? I count things from an underwriting point of view. So I'm concerned, if there's a restaurant and a bar, what are the controls in place for those patrons that are in the restaurant? Because they may sit down for a nice meal and consume multiple beverages during
Sure. Yeah.
and still get just as intoxicated.
Well, when I do longer versions of this program, I do spend a lot of time on bars and restaurants, just sort of together, because a lot of restaurants are basically bars that serve passable food, whereas other more family style restaurants might serve a beverage here and there, but their main focus is on the food prep and so forth. From an exposure standpoint, I'd say with liquor liability, I've never tried to look at it any differently, because you never know. It's easy to assume that a place like a nightclub would be a hotbed for liquor liability claims, but I think maybe there's a mentality that a lot of that risk is, a lot of that is based on risk tolerance. A lot of the people are kind of expecting that you kind of expect that it's going to be crowded. There's going to be a lot of intoxicated folks there. Maybe they'll take responsibility for their actions. Maybe they won't. Whereas, a restaurant, family style, that somebody has a few too many drinks that they weren't expecting to have, maybe didn't make preparations to have a ride, or, who knows. So I never looked from a risk standpoint at those things being very different until you start bringing in other factors like entertainment. Then you've got a major difference. A lot of your restaurants, if they do some kind of entertainment, it's fairly low key, fairly maybe something for kids, you know. Whereas you get into entertainment exposures on more alcohol-focused places, you're talking about in some cases live events, bands, and people putting on sumo suits and wrestling each other and drinking contests and all kinds of crazy stuff. So maybe from the special events side, I get a little more concerned when the sale of alcohol is much more the focus of the business. But no, to answer your question from a risk standpoint, I never really looked at it differently. Underwriting, you have to.
Sure.
Underwriting, it's very different, a business that's primarily focused on the manufacture or service of alcohol versus a food place that also serves some booze. But when I used to talk to customers about it, I just said, look, you serve alcohol. You don't have coverage under your GL policy. You're selling this stuff. Let's talk about liquor liability. And I always tried to offer it to everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. Now in my underwriting days, I was doing fire departments, and one question we would get from agents that weren't as familiar with the liquor liability and the departments is many times I guess maybe in more rural areas in particular, where there are more volunteer departments, when they have their monthly meetings, they didn't serve alcohol, but they did allow folks to bring in a beverage or two, or somebody would bring some to share and whatnot. And then there were others in a particular state. Many of the volunteer fire departments had a social club off to the side, where if you were a member of the department, you could go over there, and as a member of the department, you were a member of the club, and you could go in and have your beverages there, and it was a bar.
Yeah, sure.
And we were writing liquor liability policies on them.
Good. Yeah.
All the time, because they needed it. It was no longer a host liquor issue.
No, there's a real slippery slope there. We get a lot of questions about that. People have different events that they maybe, what is it? Is it profit? Is it, what if it's contracted out to a third party and they're the ones that are doing the service? I tell people with liquor liability, I don't know dram shop, and I don't know legal statutory protection. I don't know the law well enough in every jurisdiction to know what you could or couldn't be sued for, or could or couldn't be negligent for when it comes to service of alcohol. So as an insurance guy, my position has always been, let's err on the side of caution and get you a quote. Mm-hmm. In some states and in some cases, liquor liability is not an option. You have to buy it. You have to have a minimum amount if you serve X amount of, But in situations like you're describing, I think that was really wise of you. Maybe there's some type of liability protection built into the law somewhere for that exposure, but not being a steward of the law, I would say let's at least quote the risk. Quote them the insurance and let them tell you no.
Sure. And dollar for dollar, the protection you get for a liability policy is, pennies compared to what you could be paying out.
Well, and I haven't spent much time at the volunteer fire department social club happy hour, but I can imagine, man, you probably got some dudes that can put a few back. I'm just, am I wrong about that? Am I wrong about that?
You're absolutely right. Yeah.
So I would say, let's get the insurance.
Yeah. Buy it.
Yeah. Let's get the insurance, and not just for that, but for any alcohol gives, what is it? Liquid courage. People, it just does things to people, and,
sure.
and makes otherwise responsible people sometimes make poor choices. And let's get the insurance in there just to be safe. I mean, that's a dumb thing to say. Everybody knows that, but without getting into specific policy forms, that's about your best sales pitch.
Yep.
Well, I was going to ask how your the webinar related to Bob and Doug McKenzie's game, The Beer Hunter. but we are running out of time for the after show. So
Bob and Doug, Strange Brew.
right.
Good for you, George. Nice pull. Classic.
The boys got jobs. Yeah, they're. I love that movie.
Oh man,
Come on now,
classic.
you hoser.
Right.
It's a classic. Come on, so many people would have no idea what we're talking about right
Nope.
now.
It's okay.
Classic.
Well, I love the Ferris Bueller reference in the webinar too. If that doesn't tantalize people to check it out as well, I don't know what will. So
It's a great scene, man. The dirtbag valet parking guy. Hey, he hands him the keys. My father values this car more than my life.
He's like, sir,
Don't worry
don't
about it.
worry about it. Yep, exactly.
It holds up, man.
It does.
See, that still is Matthew Broderick to me. I saw him on Jerry Seinfeld's Comedians in Cars with Coffee show recently. I don't know if anybody's ever seen.
Sure.
If anyone, phenomenal stuff, by the way. But Broderick was a host, and he's an older guy. Now he's getting up there. I still see him as that young sort of, brash character. In fact, I still see Ferris every time I look at it. It's not fair. He's like a very accomplished thespian. Broadway and nope.
Ferris
Total
Bueller.
typecast to me. Total typecast. It's not fair, but that's the Broderick I know.
Kevin, did you want to plug your company before we say goodbye?
Yeah, sure. So I have a school in Florida, the Florida Insurance School of CE, or FISCE.com, which you can barely see at the bottom of this shirt here. So for Florida licensees, we've got a lot of topics, a lot of instructors. It's not just me. It's a bunch of us. We'd love to have you. Check out our schedule at FISCE.com. If you are not a Florida licensee, I would ask that you go to FISCE.com and look at the schedule anyway, because there might be courses on there that you find interesting. And if so, if you happen to be a member of your state Professional Insurance Agents Association or Independent Agents Association, then there's a chance that they have a partnership with us, a distribution partnership with us, and you may actually be able to take that class through your state association and get CE credit for it. So I don't want people to think just because you're, not in Florida, hey, this this group has some nice classes and instructors, but we can't get credit. Just take a look at your state association website. They may offer the courses as well. So you can't get away from us, guys. Just deal with it. We're coming for you. It's just we're encroaching on every aspect of your life. Us and our faculty. You can't get away from us. Just embrace it. Just embrace it because it's coming for you, right?
Excellent. Ooh,
Yeah.
We're grateful. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're running the world soon.
Well, I just do it for the money. That's all.
I didn't think we'd end this after show with such a harbinger of continuing educational
Coming for you.
continuum of pointlessness, of pointfulness. But
can we go? Can we?
Go ahead.
Can we go back to the Strange Brew? Can we end on that instead? Can you cut out everything after the Bob and Doug McKenzie?
Sure. Max von Sydow as the brewmeister.
Right? Oh man, you're good.
You
are good. You know what, guys? This is always fun, and I will do this anytime ever until your ratings completely plummet because nobody wants to listen to my nonsense. But if you ever want me on this show, by all means.
I would suggest a Bob and Doug reference where where they put the mouse in the bottle of Elsinore beer. I mean, what kind of liability is? Touch on that, please.
It was an intentional act, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, that might be a problem.
That might be a problem.
That could be a problem. I don't know, man. Just send me the proof of loss, and I'll mull it over, and I'll see what we can do. No, I think that might be an issue. It was an intentional act, and insurance companies don't really like those very much.
Gotcha.
That mouse did not get there by accident.
Indeed not.
Yeah.
Well, Patrick, any parting thoughts? I didn't want to end without. Okay.
No, I just want to thank Kevin for taking the time to be with us and showing off his Florida Insurance Man T-shirt. And it's always a blast to have Kevin with us.
Absolutely. Kevin, thank you so much as always for your personal approach and your expertise and your great unique blend of both. We really appreciate it. Every time you do a webinar for the Academy, it's fantastic. So thanks again. We hope everybody that tuned into the after show but hasn't watched the webinar yet does so with all dispatch and speed. So on behalf of Patrick and Kevin, thank you so much again for attending the after show, and we'll talk to you next time. Cheers.
Cheers.